He didn't come to make a speech. He didn't come to be seen. He just came to quietly leave a gift for the daughter he'd raised alone, the wedding he'd paid for in full, and the life he'd built from nothing just for her. But before he could take one step into the ballroom, she stopped him. Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't blink. "Dad, go away. You're not invited," that was all. No explanation. No thank you. Just public humiliation in the dress he paid 12 grand for. He turned around without a word, but outside, in a quiet truck parked beneath the spring rain, he made 6 calls. Vendors, bank, florist, music, food, and before the cake was even cut, a perfect wedding began to vanish, petal by petal, plate by plate, note by note. This wasn't revenge. It was a balance due. If that hooked you, smash like, subscribe, and comment below. Where are you listening from? And what would you have done if your daughter said that to you? Mark Davis stood in the entryway of the Willowmore estate, his polished boots silent against the marble floor. The soft hum of a string quartet drifted from the ballroom, mixing with the clinking of champagne flutes and the rustle of silk dresses. He held a small silver gift envelope in his hand, the edges crisp, the handwriting neat. Inside was a letter he had written the night before. It wasn't long, just a few heartfelt lines to his daughter on her wedding day. The daughter he had raised alone since her mother passed away 25 years ago. The daughter he had supported through every scraped knee, every school play, every heartbreak, and every dream. He didn't expect a grand welcome. He didn't expect hugs or attention. He just wanted to hand her the letter, wish her well, and maybe catch a glimpse of the ceremony. After all, he had paid for it, every detail, every bill, from the imported cherry blossom centerpieces to the vintage champagne, to the $18,000 wedding gown custom-stitched at a boutique in the city. He had handled it all without question. He never imagined what would happen next. Mark took one step into the ballroom corridor and caught sight of her. Rachel, radiant in that ivory dress, standing beneath a hanging archway of blossoms. For a second he was proud. Then her eyes met his. Her expression froze. Her posture stiffened. She walked toward him with deliberate grace, her voice rising just enough to cut through the ambient noise around them. "Dad, go away. You're not invited." The envelope in his hand suddenly felt heavy. He stood there, stunned, not fully processing the words. The chatter of guests didn't stop, but it softened. A few heads turned. Someone stifled a laugh. Somewhere behind her, the groom, Tyler Grant, emerged, his tailored tuxedo gleaming under chandelier light. Rachel didn't flinch. Her face remained perfectly composed, her voice louder this time. "You shouldn't be here." Mark opened his mouth but couldn't find any words. He had faced furious clients, bad contracts, and near bankruptcy before, but nothing prepared him for this. Nothing prepared him for his own child, treating him like a gatecrasher at the event he made possible. "I just came to give you this," he said softly, extending the envelope. She took a step back. "You can leave it at the table." Tyler moved closer, clearly uncomfortable. Mark nodded once, said nothing more, and placed the envelope gently on a side table near a bouquet of roses. Then, without looking back, he walked out of the venue. Outside, the spring air bit a little harder. Wind moved through the trees surrounding the estate, sending petals fluttering like confetti from a failed celebration. Mark walked across the massive parking lot toward his old truck, parked far away from the line of luxury vehicles. Every step echoed in his mind. "Not invited. Go away." He reached the truck and climbed in, his hands steady despite everything. The engine didn't start. Instead, he reached for his phone, unlocked it, and opened the contact list. His finger hovered for a moment over one name, Laura, his bank manager at Sterling & Co. He tapped. She answered on the second ring. "Mark, is everything all right?" Mark looked at the windshield, watching the ornate estate in the distance. "I need to initiate stop payments on several active wedding transactions. Immediately." There was a pause. "Sir, are you sure?" "These are significant sums, I am sure. Venue, catering, music, florals, photo team, linens, everything. Effective now." Laura's tone shifted from friendly to procedural. "I will need verbal authorization and identity confirmation. Please hold while I pull up your file." Mark provided everything. Security phrases, codes, last transactions. His voice never cracked. Within minutes, thousands of dollars in pending transactions were cancelled. That's all. Laura, thank you. He ended the call and stared out at the estate for a moment longer. This was not revenge. Not yet. This was step one. Inside that ballroom, Rachel stood in her designer dress, surrounded by laughter and praise. But behind the flowers, the smiles, the facade, the wedding had already started to collapse. And no one knew it yet. Inside the Willowmore estate, the wedding moved forward without a hint of trouble. Guests smiled, champagne flowed, and the catering team from Ridgeview Events passed hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. Rachel stood with Tyler near the front of the reception hall, accepting compliments from relatives and business acquaintances. The picture of perfection. The tension from the brief hallway encounter had vanished, at least for her. For Mark, it had only just begun. Back in his truck, parked alone beneath grey clouds, Mark wasn't finished. He opened his notes app, where every wedding-related vendor and invoice was neatly stored. He had managed large construction projects for nearly 3 decades. This wedding was treated no differently. Every contact, every quote, every payment schedule, all in one place. Next call went to the florist. Kelly from Everbloom Floral answered quickly. Kelly speaking. Kelly, it's Mark Davis. I'm calling regarding the Davis Grant wedding happening at Willowmore Estate right now. Yes, Mr. Davis. The arrangements turned out beautifully. Your daughter seemed very pleased. There's been a financial complication, he said calmly. Bank authorization on all payments has been revoked. You'll need to recover your materials if you want to preserve your assets. There was silence on the other end. Then confusion. Recover. The flowers are installed across the entire venue. Exactly. And you'll want to act fast before guests begin interfering. I suggest you speak to the venue manager about accessing your property. Without waiting for her response, he ended the call and moved down the list. Caterer, Brian from Ridgeview Events. Brian. This is Mark Davis. The payment authorization for today's wedding reception has been cancelled. Brian sounded stunned. Mr. Davis, we're in active service. The main course hasn't even been plated. Then I suggest you protect your equipment and remaining inventory. Your contract has no active funding. The venue may allow you to negotiate with the wedding party, but I no longer represent the paying party. He hung up. Music team, photographer, linen rental. One by one, Mark called each vendor and informed them of the payment cancellations. His voice never rose. His heart didn't race. This wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate, strategic. Each call struck a part of the structure Rachel had built with his money. Without funding, none of it could stand. By the time the last call ended, it was just past 4 in the afternoon. Then he waited from his truck. Mark watched as a white van marked Everbloom pulled into the estate's side entrance. Kelly and 2 assistants stepped out, rolling carts and storage containers. They moved quickly, professionally. Inside, Rachel laughed with her maid of honor, blissfully unaware. The florist team entered quietly through the staff doors. Moments later, the first floral arch near the front of the ballroom was dismantled in full view of guests. Confused looks spread like spilled wine. Conversations quieted. Rachel turned, smile still frozen on her face, watching as Kelly calmly removed centerpieces from tables. "Excuse me?" Rachel approached her. Kelly didn't look nervous. "I'm from Everbloom. Payment authorization was revoked an hour ago by the account holder, Mr. Davis. We're here to recover company property." Rachel blinked. "No, that's a mistake. Everything was paid in full. You'll need to speak with your father about that, ma'am." Across the room, Tyler appeared. "What's going on?" "Payment cancellation. We're removing our property." Other vendors began to arrive in sequence. The music team disconnected their equipment. The sound of violin strings fading mid-song caught more attention than any announcement. Caterers began covering food trays, wrapping up uneaten portions. Servers stopped pouring drinks. Guests were no longer celebrating. They were watching. Rachel's expression shifted from annoyance to panic. Tyler's parents stood to the side, whispering urgently, clearly concerned about the optics. The venue manager appeared at Rachel's side, speaking in a low tone. Mrs. Grant, we've just been informed by several vendors that payment authorization has been withdrawn. They're within their rights to remove assets if the account holder cancelled coverage. Rachel stared at her. What account holder? Your father, Mr. Davis. All payments for today's services originated from his account. He contacted all vendors personally. Outside, Mark watched as the string quartet loaded their cases into a van. Wind stirred through the cherry blossom petals that had begun to scatter across the lot. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. This wasn't satisfaction, it was necessity. Inside, Rachel stood in the wreckage of what had once been a dream wedding. And she was only beginning to understand just how fragile that dream really was. The reception hall was now a portrait of unraveling elegance. White tablecloths remained, but the centerpieces were gone. Platters sat covered and cold. The faint scent of cherry blossoms had been replaced by a sharp tension that clung to the air like smoke. Guests whispered in clumps, trying to understand what had just happened. Rachel could feel their eyes on her, some sympathetic, most curious, and a few amused. Tyler's voice was low but pointed as he spoke to her near the head table. You said your father was just here to drop something off. Now everything is falling apart. I didn't think he'd do this, she snapped, panic leaking into her voice. I didn't know he'd actually cancel anything. You humiliated him, Tyler said flatly. In front of everyone, she folded her arms defensively. He showed up uninvited. This was supposed to be private. He paid for it, Rachel. That sentence hit harder than she expected. Tyler's jaw was clenched, his eyes darting across the room as another vendor unplugged lights near the stage. He wasn't angry just because the wedding was falling apart. He was angry because it was happening publicly. Tyler Grant came from a family that valued image over everything. And right now, the image was crumbling like wet paper. Behind them, the sound technician coiled cables with mechanical precision. 2 catering staff members wheeled a large dessert cart through the side exit, untouched cake still resting on top. Rachel pulled out her phone and scrolled to her father's contact. Her fingers hovered over the call button, then tapped it. Voicemail. She tried again. Still voicemail. She began to text, but deleted the message halfway through. Across the ballroom, Tyler's parents approached. His mother's face was carefully composed. His father's, not so much. Rachel, we need to talk, his father said. His tone was polite, but carried the unmistakable weight of disapproval. She followed them to a quieter corner of the hall. Tyler's mother spoke first. Were you aware that every vendor here was paid through your father's business accounts? Rachel nodded slowly. And you excluded him from the event entirely. I didn't think he'd care. He never asked to be involved in the planning. I figured he'd prefer not to be here. Her words sounded weak, even to herself. Tyler's father looked at his son, then back at Rachel. Do you realize how this makes us look? These vendors are leaving mid-service. People are going to talk. They already are. We'll cover the costs, Tyler offered quickly. No, we won't, his father snapped. Not until we understand the full financial situation. I want to see everything. The contracts, the payments, the sources. Rachel's heart dropped. She knew what that meant. They were starting to question her. Tyler looked away. His parents walked off, and Rachel stood there in the middle of a reception that was no longer hers. It belonged to her father now, or rather, to the silence he had left behind. Meanwhile, across town, Mark sat at his desk reviewing files. Not photos, not memories, but invoices, records, contracts, every receipt that funded Rachel's life from childhood to this very day. Her education, her cars, her trips, her apartment, and now this wedding. It had all been tracked, all recorded, quietly, meticulously. The files weren't for revenge, they were for clarity. He needed her to understand what she had erased with one sentence. Go away. You're not invited. Mark's phone buzzed. Another call from Rachel. He ignored it. Another buzz. Another voicemail. He tapped through and listened without expression. Dad, I know you're upset. Can we please talk? This is getting out of control. People are confused. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please just call me back. She didn't apologize. Not yet. She was still focused on the fallout, not the cause. Mark opened a folder labeled Rachel Expenses and began to build a spreadsheet. Not out of spite, out of necessity. If she wanted to pretend this wedding, this life, was hers alone, she would soon see the numbers that said otherwise. At the Willowmore estate, the music had stopped. The food was cold. The guests were restless, and the bride? She stood frozen in her $18,000 dress, surrounded by the crumbling remains of someone else's generosity. The sun had begun to set behind the Willowmore estate, casting long shadows across the reception hall. The event had reached a strange, suspended state. Not celebration, not disaster, but something in between. A few guests lingered awkwardly, nursing half-empty glasses of champagne. Others made quiet exits under the pretense of early mornings and prior commitments. Rachel sat alone now at the head table, her hands folded in her lap. Her veil had been removed. Her makeup, once flawless, was beginning to crack at the edges, not from tears but from tension. Her phone sat on the table beside her, dark and unmoving. The silence around her buzzed louder than the music ever had. Tyler was outside in the courtyard with his father, arguing over something she couldn't hear. Probably about optics, family reputation, damage control. All things Tyler's family cared about deeply, and she now realized things they had assumed her family shared. She stared at the cake. 4 tiers of vanilla and blood orange buttercream, covered in edible gold leaf and fresh orchids. No one had touched it. She picked up her phone and called again. Still no answer. Mark sat in his truck just outside Ridgeview, parked under a tree in a quiet public lot. He watched the phone screen light up with her name again and again. Each call unanswered. Each voicemail unlistened. Not yet. She hadn't said the one thing that mattered. He opened his laptop and connected it to his mobile hotspot. He brought up the spreadsheet he had started the night before and began entering figures. Line by line, tuition at Ridgeview Academy, $22,000 per year. 12 years. North River University, $54,000 per year for 4 years. Summer abroad, $8,300. Study programs, clothing, vehicle leases, electronics, holidays, rent, groceries, insurance, deposits, travel, allowances. It added up fast. He knew it would. That's why he had always tracked it, not because he expected payback, but because he needed to know what his sacrifice had built, and now, with the wedding included, the total sat just under $938,000. 28 years of unconditional support, now filed neatly into columns marked date, description, amount, and category. He added one final note under the column labeled Result Dismissed at Wedding. Removed from event. Deactivated as family. The truth wasn't emotional. It was financial. Rachel's latest voicemail arrived just as he shut the laptop. Dad, I know you're ignoring me, but please just talk to me. I can fix this. I didn't mean to humiliate you. I was under pressure. Tyler's family had certain expectations, and I didn't want to embarrass them. That line, I didn't want to embarrass them, echoed louder than anything else. He leaned back in the truck seat, eyes fixed on the darkening sky. For 28 years, he had never cared about being embarrassed. He wore worn boots to recitals, sat in the back row of every theater to avoid blocking anyone's view. He skipped business trips to attend science fairs. He gave quietly, expected little. But today, he had asked for nothing and was still told to leave. He opened the envelope he had brought to the wedding, the one Rachel never accepted. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. A letter. Rachel, I know this day means the world to you. I know you've been planning it down to every detail. I also know you and I have grown distant. Maybe because of time, maybe because I didn't belong in your new world, but I'm proud of you. I always have been. Everything you are came from what we built together. If I don't get a chance to say it in person, congratulations. I hope today gives you the future you dreamed of. With love, Dad. He folded the letter again, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it into the glove box. At the Willowmore estate, Rachel was now alone. The guests had left. The vendors were gone. Tyler hadn't come back inside. She sent one final message before midnight. "Dad, I'm sorry, but it was too late for a text." She had said those words in front of hundreds of people. "Go away. You're not invited." Now she was the only one left at the party. The next morning, Mark Davis woke before dawn. He hadn't slept much, but he wasn't tired. There was too much to do, not out of spite, but precision. He had built his construction business on discipline, on measuring twice and cutting once. Now he was applying the same standards to something far more personal, the collapse of a relationship he had spent 28 years funding. Coffee brewed quietly in the corner of his kitchen. Outside, a soft fog had settled over Ridgeview, muting the world into a grayscale hush. Mark carried his mug into his home office, a converted back room where filing cabinets lined one wall and two desks sat perpendicular, one for planning, the other for records. His laptop was already open, the spreadsheet glowing softly in the dim morning light. He scrolled through the rows, every transaction related to Rachel, from the kindergarten tuition to the $18,000 wedding dress, was there. He added categories for clarity: education, transportation, housing, personal expenses, wedding. Under each category, he began uploading scanned receipts and financial statements. A system of accountability, not for Rachel's sake, but for his own clarity. Education totaled just over $400,000. Housing and living expenses over the years, 125,000 vehicles, 3 different cars, all replaced before their leases expired, 68,000. Wedding, when all was said and done, including catering, venue, travel attire, and floral, $147,000. Altogether, $938,000. And Rachel hadn't contributed a single dime. He didn't resent the money. He resented what it had created. Someone who saw his presence as an inconvenience, not a gift. At 8 a.m., he called his lawyer. Diane Miller had handled several property deals for him over the years. She was fast, professional, and brutally honest, just how he liked it. "Morning, Diane, I need a consultation. Today." She didn't ask why. "Come in at 10. At 10 o'clock sharp, Mark arrived at the brick office on Main Street. Diane's assistant offered him coffee, which he declined. When Diane entered the conference room, she already had a notepad in hand. "What's the issue?" Mark opened his laptop and turned it to face her. He said nothing while she scrolled through the spreadsheet, reading line by line. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't interrupt. When she reached the bottom of the document, she closed the lid and folded her hands. "This is comprehensive. What do you want to do with it?" "I want a formal demand letter. Repayment in full, 30 days. No emotion, no drama, just business." She studied him for a moment. "You're aware this will escalate things significantly?" He nodded. "She's already escalated it, publicly." Diane leaned back in her chair. "All right, I'll draft the demand letter today. You'll need to sign a formal statement of intent. I suggest including documentation for all major transactions to avoid disputes." "I brought printed copies," Mark replied, placing a folder on the table. She flipped through it. "Impressive. This is the kind of record-keeping I wish all my clients had." By noon, the paperwork was complete. A formal letter demanding $938,000 due in full within 30 days. Failure to respond would result in immediate legal action, including asset liens and formal debt recovery proceedings, all phrased professionally. All airtight courier delivery would go out by 2 p.m., addressed to Rachel Grant at the Haven Ridge Inn, where she and Tyler were staying. Signature required. Mark left the office and went home. His phone buzzed with a missed call from Rachel, then another, then 3 more. He ignored them. At 2:47 p.m., his phone buzzed with a message from the courier, delivery confirmed, signed by Rachel Grant. The silence that followed was different than before. It wasn't desperate or chaotic. It was quiet, calculating, waiting. Then the calls started again. "Dad, please." "What is this?" "You never said this was debt, $900,000. "Are you serious?" "We need to talk." He didn't answer. Rachel had erased her father from her wedding. Now he had erased his financial support retroactively. She had celebrated her marriage in a dress he paid for, surrounded by guests he fed, in a venue he funded, while telling him he didn't belong. Now, the paper trail told a different story. The first signs came quietly, almost like background noise. A tagged post here, a suspicious email there. But by Monday morning, it was undeniable. Rachel had taken the story public. Mark's assistant, Jenna, stepped into his office holding a printed email. "You need to see this," she said, placing the paper on his desk. It was from a reporter at the Ridgeview Herald, politely requesting comment on a developing family dispute potentially affecting the Davis contracting brand and its reputation within the local community. Mark read it once, then again, slower. The tone was measured, but the implications were clear. Someone was spreading a version of the story that made him look unstable. "What's the source?" Jenna hesitated. "There's also this," she handed over her tablet. On screen was a Facebook post shared over 300 times. A picture of Rachel and Tyler at the wedding, both smiling, cropped from the brief window when everything had still looked perfect. Below the photo, the caption read, "I never thought my own father would try to destroy my wedding out of spite. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I always knew he valued money more than family." There were hundreds of comments. People offering support, expressing outrage, tagging local business owners and community groups. Some of the names were familiar: vendors, past clients, even a few city officials Mark had worked with over the years. Mark remained silent. Jenna watched him carefully. "What do you want to do?" He turned to his laptop. "We respond with facts. He didn't call Rachel. He didn't send angry texts. He opened the same spreadsheet he'd shown Diane Miller. Then he uploaded it to a secure public drive. Every transaction, every category, every supporting receipt. He created a timeline, 28 years of documented support for his daughter. Then, calmly, he typed up a public response. "I have seen recent statements regarding my relationship with my daughter Rachel. I'm choosing to respond, not with emotion, but with documentation. Over the past 28 years, I have provided $938,000 in direct financial support to Rachel, including full payment for the wedding she has publicly disassociated me from. I was asked to leave that wedding, which I fully funded. I complied without conflict. Now that my financial role is being publicly denied, I am releasing full records of that support. Let the facts speak for themselves." He posted the message, along with the documentation link, across all major platforms associated with his business: Facebook, LinkedIn, even the company website. The reaction was immediate. The Ridgeview Herald retracted their pending story and requested an interview to clarify the facts. Local business owners messaged Mark in support. Longtime clients reposted his statement, adding their own endorsements of his character. Within 2 hours, Rachel's narrative began to collapse. Comments under her original post started shifting. People were linking to Mark's spreadsheet, pointing out the specific transactions, questioning why someone would lie about such a paper trail. A few posts even mocked the wedding costs: $18,000 for a dress, $12,000 for flowers, $5,000 for champagne. By nightfall, Tyler's family had gone silent on social media. Tyler himself hadn't posted anything. Rachel, however, sent 6 more texts. "Dad, I never thought you'd go this far. You're humiliating me. Publicly. People are calling me ungrateful. Tyler's parents are furious. They want to know how much of the wedding was really paid by you. Tyler wants to talk to you directly, Mark." Read each one without responding. He didn't need to speak. The documents were already doing the talking. At 9:30 that evening, he received a final message from Rachel. "I don't know how to fix this." He closed his phone and looked out the window. The town of Ridgeview was quiet, lit only by scattered porch lights and dim street lamps. For the first time in 3 days, he allowed himself a breath of stillness. This wasn't revenge. This was reputation management, and it was working. Rachel sat on the edge of the hotel bed at the Haven Ridge Inn, her phone on silent beside her. The TV was off, the lights were low, and the silence between her and Tyler was louder than any fight they had ever had. He stood near the window, arms folded, watching cars pass on the wet street below. The only sound was the soft hum of the HVAC unit and the occasional ping of her phone, lighting up with new comments. New reposts, new damage. Rachel had stopped checking her social media. After the fifth comment that called her spoiled, the third that called her a parasite, and the first that directly compared her wedding dress to a down payment on a house, Tyler finally spoke. Your father posted every dollar, every receipt. Rachel looked up, defensive already. He blindsided me. I didn't even know he was keeping records like that. That's not the point, Rachel. The point is, you asked him to leave from a wedding he paid for, and now the whole town knows. She swallowed, but her throat was dry. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't want him involved. He's always been so rough, loud. You've seen how he dresses. He would have stood out. Tyler turned sharply. You mean he would have embarrassed you? Rachel didn't respond. He paced once, then stopped and faced her. My parents are furious. They feel like they were misled. They thought we were covering half the wedding. Turns out your dad paid for all of it. They feel like they were tricked into thinking this was a partnership, when it was just charity. It wasn't charity. It was a gift. He interrupted. A loan? You tell me, Rachel, because your dad seems to think it was an investment. He rubbed his face. I'm getting calls from business contacts asking about this drama. My mom's friends are gossiping in their country club group chats. One of them called me asking if the honeymoon was still happening or if we needed a GoFundMe. Rachel winced. And now this letter. $900,000? 30 days to repay or face legal action? This is your family, Rachel. This is what you come from. Don't talk to me like I'm toxic, she snapped. He stepped back. I'm not saying you're toxic. I'm saying your relationship with your father is broken, and it's exploding all over everything we're trying to build. She reached for her phone. Maybe I can talk to him. Get him to take the letter back. Maybe we can settle this privately. Tyler shook his head. It's too late for that. Your dad posted the numbers. Everyone saw them. It's not about settling now. It's about credibility. You made him look like a villain, and he countered with receipts. Rachel wanted to scream, to cry, to rewind the last 72 hours, but all she could do was sit in that luxury hotel room in her designer pajamas, surrounded by wedding gifts she no longer wanted to open. Tyler grabbed his jacket. Where are you going? She asked. For air. He didn't look back when he walked out the door. Meanwhile, Mark sat in his office, calmly organizing printed versions of the spreadsheet and supporting files into manila folders, one for each category, each tabbed, each dated. He labeled the main folder, Rachel Davis Financials, 1997 to 2025. The final document to be added, a scanned copy of the demand letter, signed and time-stamped. He took a deep breath, then turned off the light and walked into the kitchen. The kettle hissed softly on the stove. He didn't need to see Rachel cry. He didn't need to hear apologies. What he needed, what he had waited decades for, was acknowledgement. Across town, Rachel stared at her wedding ring, and for the first time in her adult life, she didn't know who to call, because the man who always picked up had finally put her on hold. Tyler didn't come back to the hotel that night. Rachel checked the clock at least a dozen times before finally falling asleep in the guest robe, her phone still clenched in her hand. When she woke the next morning, the room was cold. The sunlight, filtering through the curtains, felt too bright, too sharp. His side of the bed was untouched. There was a note on the counter. Rachel, my father called. We need to have a serious conversation. I'll be at my parents' house. Don't contact me until I reach out. Tyler. The words might as well have been carved into stone. Rachel sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly aware of just how quiet everything was. No wedding music, no guests, no honeymoon bags, no husband. She reached for her phone and opened her messages. Dozens of unread notifications still poured in. People reacting to the now viral story of the disinvited father and the vanished wedding. Screenshots of the financial breakdown Mark had posted were being shared across multiple platforms. One comment hit harder than the rest. Imagine taking nearly $1 million from your dad and still telling him to leave. She shut her phone. Mid-morning, a knock sounded at her door. She hesitated, then opened it. It was Tyler's mother. She walked in without waiting for an invitation. Perfectly dressed, perfectly calm, but her eyes carried none of the warmth from wedding day pleasantries. "We need to talk," she said simply. Rachel nodded and stepped aside. Tyler's mother took a seat at the table, her posture flawless. "My family is in damage control mode. Your father's records are detailed, comprehensive, and public. The number being shared is 938,000. The optics are not survivable." Rachel sat across from her, unsure of what to say. "I've spoken to legal counsel," she continued. "There are options: quiet separation, annulment under grounds of material misrepresentation. If executed properly, it will protect our family assets and allow both parties to move on with minimal scandal." Rachel blinked. "Are you talking about dissolving the marriage?" Tyler's mother didn't flinch. "We're talking about minimizing reputational fallout. You created a financial illusion. Tyler believed your family was contributing a balanced share to the wedding. That was not the case." "My father wanted to pay for everything," Rachel said defensively, "and then you publicly disinvited him from the very thing he funded." Rachel's throat tightened. It wasn't about money. No, it was about perception. "You invited our family into a story we didn't know we were part of. And now the ending is unfolding online." Tears welled in Rachel's eyes, but she forced them back. "Tyler still loves me." His mother sighed, then stood. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to give you time to prepare." "Prepare for what?" "For a world where this doesn't blow over. For a future where Tyler's career, investments, and reputation are at stake, and your marriage is considered a liability." She walked to the door. "You're young, Rachel, and you were given too much without earning it. Now the world is giving you something else. Consequences." Then she left. Rachel sat there in stunned silence. She had thought the wedding was the beginning of everything, but now it seemed like it had been the peak, and everything after was a descent. She looked at her phone again. No new calls from Tyler, no messages from anyone she could turn to. Just her father's name, still sitting in her contacts, unread and unanswered. Across Ridgeview, Mark stood at a job site, clipboard in hand. His crew was setting foundations for a new office building. He watched as the concrete mixer poured the base layer, slow and steady. Foundations, he thought, are only strong if built with the right materials. He had given Rachel everything she needed, but not everything she should have earned. Now she would have to build from nothing. The education wasn't over. 3 days after the wedding imploded, Rachel sat alone at a cafe near downtown Ridgeview. She wasn't dressed like a newlywed anymore. No diamond earrings, no designer coat. Just jeans, a sweater, and the flat look of someone who had run out of explanations. She stirred her coffee without drinking it. She had tried to contact Tyler again that morning. Still nothing. The last message she'd received from him wasn't even from him. It was from his father's attorney. A formally worded statement, informing her that the Grant family would be seeking annulment, citing irreconcilable misrepresentation of financial stability and family relations. Translation: they were cutting their losses. Her hands trembled as she opened her phone and reread the words again. "You invited us into a lie. We're correcting it." She closed the message and opened a different one. This one from her father. She hadn't replied to it yet. He hadn't texted out of anger or to gloat. Just a short, matter-of-fact note. "Rachel, you have 22 days remaining. If you wish to resolve this differently, you know where to find me. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't emotional. It was deliberate. She had seen the spreadsheet by now, the one the entire town had seen, the rows of expenses, each line a memory she had long taken for granted. School tuition, rent deposits, study abroad programs, flights, cars, phones, insurance, groceries, and finally, the wedding. She remembered asking for many of those things. What she didn't remember was saying thank you. She hadn't thanked him when he worked overtime to cover her sorority dues. She hadn't thanked him when he co-signed the lease for her downtown apartment. She hadn't thanked him when she needed $3,000 for a networking trip, and he transferred it the same afternoon. And now, here she was. No husband, no home, no money, no allies. She opened a job board app and scrolled aimlessly. The listings blurred together. Front desk assistant, barista, retail sales associate, childcare aide, dishwasher. Each one felt like a punch, not because she was above them, but because she had never tried. Not once, not in 28 years. A year ago, she had told a friend she wanted to build something of her own. That same friend had suggested she intern at a small firm. Rachel never followed through. She hadn't needed to. Now she did. She selected a listing for a receptionist position at a dental clinic and started filling out the form. Meanwhile, across town, Mark reviewed a letter from his attorney. Diane had sent an updated draft for the demand package, just in case he wanted to file in court. He hadn't responded yet. He didn't know if he wanted to. He walked through his house slowly, checking locks, turning off lights. The same routine he'd followed for years, but tonight something felt heavier, not regret, but weight. He walked into his home office and stared at the manila folders stacked on his desk. Every dollar documented, every expense justified. And yet, a daughter lost to entitlement. He had done everything he thought a good father should do, but maybe that was the problem. He had made sure Rachel never lacked for anything, but had also made sure she never had to earn anything either. His phone buzzed. "Rachel, can we meet?" He stared at the message for a long moment. Then with no emotion he typed back, "Tomorrow, 11 a.m. The shop." He placed the phone face down on the desk and went to bed without checking it again. The next day would not bring closure. It would bring confrontation. The kind of conversation they should have had years ago. The next morning, the clock on the workshop wall ticked past 10:55 as Mark Davis wiped his hands on a shop towel and looked toward the glass-paneled front door. His contracting office smelled of sawdust and machine oil, clean, solid, honest. Every corner reflected his life's work. A calendar hung beside the door, a whiteboard with supply orders sat behind the counter, and above the entryway hung the old shop rule, measure twice, cut once. At exactly 11 o'clock, the door creaked open. Rachel stepped inside, her eyes scanning the space like she was entering unfamiliar territory. Her once pristine aura was gone. No designer shoes, no styled hair, just worn sneakers, a wrinkled jacket, and the heavy look of someone carrying the consequences of their own choices. Mark didn't speak first. She stood there awkwardly, fidgeting with her sleeves. The silence felt like a weight between them. "You got my message," she said quietly. "I did. I'm not here to argue. That's good." She took a breath. "I've been applying for jobs. I have 2 interviews this week. Receptionist work, entry level. Nothing glamorous, but it's something." Mark nodded once. "That's a start." She stepped closer, her voice faltering. "I saw everything you posted, the records, the spreadsheet, the letter. I read every line. And I didn't know how much you gave up for me. Not just the money, the time, the choices, your future. I thought I was just being supported, like it was normal. It wasn't normal, Rachel. It was a lifetime. I know that now." She looked at the calloused hands he had folded over the counter. Hands that had built her childhood room, fixed her first car, and paid for every piece of the life she took for granted. "I'm not asking you to forget what I did. I need to earn back your trust. I need to prove that I'm not that person anymore. Mark didn't speak for a long time. When I walked out of that wedding, I didn't feel angry, Rachel. I felt nothing. And that scared me more than anything. She nodded, eyes downcast. He continued, You told me I didn't belong, after I spent nearly $1 million making sure you never had to struggle. And when it all fell apart, your first instinct was to blame me. I know, she whispered. The letter stands. 30 days. Rachel looked up sharply, caught between panic and confusion. But you have 20 days left. I'm not rescinding the demand. If you can't pay it, we'll work out a repayment schedule. A legal one, with terms. I'm done giving without acknowledgement. Her face flushed. So, this is just business now? No, Mark said, finally stepping around the counter. This is how we rebuild. On earned ground. No more illusions. No more entitlement. You want to be treated like an adult? Then you'll handle this like one. Rachel's voice cracked. Can we still talk? Can I still see you? That depends on what you do next. She stood frozen, blinking fast. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. It was worn, the edges soft from being handled too many times. I found this at the venue. The gift you left. Mark took it without a word and opened it. His own handwriting stared back at him. The letter he had written before it all collapsed. Rachel, I know this day means the world to you. I know you've been planning it down to every detail. I also know you and I have grown distant, maybe because of time, maybe because I didn't belong in your new world. But I'm proud of you. I always have been. Everything you are came from what we built together. If I don't get a chance to say it in person, congratulations. I hope today gives you the future you dreamed of. With love, Dad. She watched him read it, tears in her eyes. I never deserved that letter, she said softly. But I want to become the daughter who does. Mark looked at her finally, not with anger, not with sadness, just clarity, then start proving it. She nodded, wiped her face, and turned to leave. As the door closed behind her, Mark returned the letter to its envelope and placed it on the shelf above his desk. It wasn't forgiveness, it was a receipt. If this story hit home, hit like, share, and subscribe, and let us know in the comments, do you think Rachel truly changed? Or is she just reacting to consequences? Would you have forgiven her? Your answer might say more than you think.